Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome to another Halloween 2019 video on my YouTube channel and blog. And first off, I'm just going to show off the Paper Smooches September release. Anyone who has been following me for a really long time, like 10 plus years, knows that I have been a fan of Paper Smooches since way back when Kim Hughes, the owner, used to design for Cornish Heritage Farms. I think I still have the original red rubber stamps in a box somewhere. Love, 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 always have. So she invited me to guest for September, and I said yes because I wasn't going to say no. And these were the sets of earlies, which were, of course, right up my alley, because not only are they Paper Smooches, but they're also Halloween themed. A couple little fall items in there. I will have links to all of it in the description box below, as well as on my blog if you want to check it out. So to start off with, I am using the Best Witches stamp set. And I just have some Bristol Smooth cardstock here. And I am using some Hero Arts, the Hero Hues Reactive inks that I've shown in a couple videos so far. And funny thing is, I wanted to stamp these martini glasses from the set, and this fog color with these Hero Art inks, I was like, this is perfect. It's like the color kind of glass. Like, it's just kind of perfect. I know I had a few people saying like they found it sort of an odd color with the rest of them because the other ones are very bright. But for something like this, I was like, it's just perfect. It was like meant to be. So I stamped the glasses 3 times because I was only going to start with one. And then I was like, I've got the space. Let's, keep going. So I stamped them with the fog ink. And because these do take a little bit of time to dry, they're still, it's hard to explain with these. They're they are a mix between a dye ink and a pigment ink, but they're still slightly different. I'll get more into that in a minute. But they do take a little bit longer to dry, which gives you time. You can heat emboss with them. So that's what I did. I stamped them and then I clear heat embossed them because I wanted that shiny finish to, again, kind of look like glass. And then I also stamped the little ghost from the set, but this time I stamped him on vellum, just with some clear embossing ink, and then I used white embossing powder. So stamped him, heat embossed him, and then I was like, oh, I've still got some space on that scrap of Bristol Smooth cardstock. So I'm like, I'm going to stamp that little candy corn character, which just cracks me up, his little arms and legs. So I stamped him a couple times with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And I'm going to heat emboss these little guys as well with the clear embossing powder. It's not necessary. I just like doing it because I smear especially black ink, and on Bristol Smooth. And even then, I was smearing these inks, like making these, because I'm a mess. Anyway, clear heat emboss these little guys. And then I am going to die cut all of them with the coordinating wafer dies. So I'll have to run these through a couple times since I have more than one of each stamped. I'm going to use the coordinating dies to die cut the martini glass, the little candy corn character, and that little ghost that I had stamped on the vellum. So I'll just tape these dies into place with my washi tape and then die cut them. I could have colored everything first, let it dry, and then die cut. It doesn't matter. Like, whatever, personal preference. Some days I'll cut first, then color. More often than not, I'll color everything, let it dry, and then die cut it. Again, though, it just kind of depends on my mood. So taped everything into place, die cut them. And I decided to use those Hero Arts Reactive inks for my coloring. So just very simple. I would just smush basically the corner of the ink pad onto my glass media mat here. Any non-porous sort of surface will work for this sort of thing, like plastic packaging, etc. A ceramic plate, anything. So I just smushed the corner of the yellow, which is the Creamsicle color. No, Lemon Drop. I don't think I listed that color. Lemon Drop, obviously. Creamsicle's the orange. So squish those ink pads onto my glass surface, picked up the color with my little water brush, and painted it on. Really simple. With the martini glasses for the liquid, I'm wanting to go with Halloween colors. I kind of dot on the color almost. It was more so just so I could pick up more color with my water brush. I wanted to just intensify it. As it dries, you kind of lose some of that dotty sort of texture that you can see right here. But I would have been okay if that had lasted too, because, I'm thinking, Halloween and potions and all that fun stuff. So did the orange, the creamsicle for the one color. Then I used, of course, grape slush for another. And then I'm going to use Key Lime Fizz. So like, you know, this bright acid green for the final one. And with all of these, after I'm done coloring them, I just kind of set them aside to dry, aka push them to the top of my desk, which is what I'm going to do here. Push everything out of the way so I can pull out my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Media or Station. That's, yeah. Showed this in a recent haul video, wanted to try it out and play with it. As always, I don't seem to have the space for anything, so I just shove it all out of the way. But the cool thing with this, like I showed in my haul video, is this little like station is metal, and there's the magnets that are included with it. So I am just holding down my card base and the stencil with these magnets. I did use some Post-it tape because I'm masking off what will be the back of my card base because I don't want it to show up. And then I'm using the Buffalo Check stencil from this September Paper Smooches release. And over it, I am adding some of the Hero Arts Reactive ink in Sea Salt, aka white ink. So, like I said, these inks are kind of this weird cross between pigment and dye, and yet slightly different than other ones. Closest comparison would be the Distress Oxide inks, but they're not the same. They're different. And I will show later again. They don't have as much of that pigment that, you know, shows up opaque on dark cardstocks. This one does. This one is the exception to all the other ones. This white, the sea salt color, it does show up very nicely. I'm curious though, I'm gonna have to play and see if the colors would show up if I applied them like this, like really thick. They might, but stamping them, they're not gonna show up on dark cardstock. This one does though. It's not as white. Like if you want that more white pigment showing up, because that's something I get asked a lot. There's other like strictly white pigment inks out there. Like Hero Arts has their own, like the Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink. That's one of my favorites. Simon Says Stamp has one, etc. If you want like stark white on dark cardstock, that's where you need to use white embossing powder. I have yet to come across any other than like white paint. So, anywho, this shows up though really nicely. So I had blended that sea salt ink onto my card base there, black card base, which I don't do very often, and love how that turned out. I taped my card base shut after I heat set this ink just to make sure it was completely dry, and then I'm going to add splatter, of course. So I'm going to use my Distress Oxides. Speaking of oxides, the comparison between the inks, if you have the Oxide inks, do you need the Hero Arts inks? Not necessarily, but I like having all between the two. I find they're different colors. And I like to have all the things when it comes to colors and coloring mediums. That's just my thing. So anyway, back to the card. I'm using Oxide Splatter or Oxide Spray to create splatter in 3 color, orange, green, purple, of course. Shaking them side to side, kind of like a bell. That is the Tim Holtz recommended way to mix up the pigment in these splatters or sprays. I use them mostly for splatter, so I don't even call them sprays anymore. They're like Distress Oxide Splatter. Anyway. The Oxide Splatter always shows up. On dark cardstock, it shows up much more vibrant than it will when it dries. As it dries back and kind of does its fun little oxidizing effect, it, you know, mellows out is the easiest way to explain it, which I'm more than happy with. So I did all that splatter, set the card base aside again, aka shoved it off to the side while I finish everything else. I blended a bit of that grape slush ink onto some just white cardstock, just very lightly, just to give it a little bit of a background. And then I'd stamped a sentiment from that set that I've got booze sentiment with black ink. And then I adhered the martini glasses with thin little 3D foam squares, as well as my little candy corn characters. In my head, I'm like, they're just having a party. That's kind of the whole idea that, you know, manifested itself with this card. So we've got the booze and we got the little partiers and, you know. So I adhered the candy corn characters with the foam tape. And then to adhere the ghost, because it's on vellum and I didn't want the adhesive to show, I just added a tiny little bit of multi-medium matte adhesive behind the heat embossing. So right behind his eye and his mouth specifically. And then press that onto the glass. So it really looks like the ghost is like floating there. Love how that turned out. So here's where I figured out for sure that these Hero Arts inks, the reactives, like the colors, don't show up very well on dark cardstock. I started stamping these images to finish off the inside, and they don't really show up. Again, it might be different if I was like blending ink onto it, like over a stencil. They might show up because you're, you know, applying it thicker. But the fog ink, just barely showed up. Again, the sea salt shows up great, obviously. The purple, no go. So to fix this, because I obviously wasn't going to leave it like this, I just grabbed a piece of white cardstock and I'm just going to stamp everything again, this time leaving the ghost off because you wouldn't see him if I stamped white on white. So I stamped the glass with the fog ink and then added the little candy corn character, the sentiment, and then I just decided to pull in a little bit of the green and used a couple of the little star stamps that are in the set. I'm just going to stamp those with that key lime fizz ink, and that's going to add my little, you know, decoration to the inside of the card. And this also saves me because then when I go to send this to someone, I can just write with a regular ballpoint pen. When it is a dark card base like black or any sort of dark cardstock and the inside is just left without a liner or anything, I just use a gel pen, you know, white gel pen or like a colored jelly roll pen. It's something like that, and it's good to go. So this is one way though, is just to add a little liner with a lighter color of cardstock or pattern paper, etc. So I adhered that over the previous, you know, inside of the card. And then to finish off the outside, I'm going to pop the little main panel here onto the card with some of Simon Says Stamps Big Mama foam tape. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I have these Studio Caudia Iridescent Bubbles embellishments. I've used these in several videos over the last year or two, however long they've been out. And I thought those would be perfect, of course, with, like, I was thinking like bubbling potion, you know, martinis, etc. So I thought it'd be kind of just a cute little add-on. So I adhered a bunch of these with some craft tacky glue. And that's going to finish off card number 1, because of course I had to make a second card. There are too many cute stamps and fun things to play with. So I just adhered all of these into place with that craft tacky glue. So I've got my little party. And then for card number 2, I'm using that same buffalo check stencil. This time I'm going to do a white card base. So same thing, I'm just going to use that same post-it tape just to mask off what will be the back of the card. And then assemble, like, or place all this on this Wendy Vecchi Make Art station. And then hold the stencil in place with the magnets. And then with this one, I'm going to blend that Creamsicle ink over it with one of my Picket Fence life-changing blender brushes. And with this, in areas I applied heavier ink, some lighter ink, heavier pressure, lighter pressure. So I ended up getting just a little bit of a variation. I also chose to use these brushes, I forgot to mention that, with this stencil because there's some fine detail with the lighter, like the really thin lines. So I wanted to make sure I was able to pick that up. So I found the brushes worked perfectly for this. So I just went around and added all this ink to the card front. And then I can pop off the stencil, wipe it down, wipe down the station. I just use a baby wipe with that. And then I can set that aside. So then I've got my card front. And then for the main images, I'm using the Face Off stamp set and the Pumpkin and Ghost wafer dies. These coordinate, but they're not. I don't think they were designed to go together in the sense of the wafer die isn't meant to cut out the stamped ghost. It works, but they're the exact same size. But I wanted that. I wanted the outline just so I can white heat emboss it. But you could just die cut the ghost and either stamp. There's all the little face images in the face off set, or you can use the die cuts. But they aren't coordinating like the other set. They're each standalone. It's a standalone stamp set and a standalone die set. I just chose to use them together. So I'd stamp the outline on the vellum and I'd die cut it first because it was easier to line up because that one, out of the whole set, like that one and the pumpkin one, they're solid wafer dies. So stamp those and then I use this little, it's supposed to be a winky, you know, facing downwards, like as if someone has their eyes closed or winking, the little expression. But I thought this little stamp would make really cute little eyelashes. So I stamped that after I had white heat embossed the face and the outline. And then I stamped that with the VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink and clear heat embossed it. So it looks like the ghost has little black eyelashes. I just thought it was cute. So I did that. And then I had die cut down another piece of black cardstock. And I'm stamping sentiments from that set with clear embossing ink. And then I will heat emboss these with the same detail white embossing powder. Once these are heat embossed, I'm going to add more of that splatter just to tie everything in together. And also because I splatter all of the things. And once I start, I just can't stop. It's an addiction and it's fun. As you can tell by my splat box, it is covered. Usually, even with the splat box, so are my clothes, my desk, my window, like everything. Everything's covered in splatter. It's all fun. So same colors, same idea. Shook them up really well side to side, and then just took the nozzle out, flicked it at the cardstock, and created all that splatter. And then set that aside to dry. Once it was dry, I wanted to finish the inside of the card. So I'm just stamping more images from the face-off set, specifically this little pumpkin. So I inked up the base of the pumpkin with that creamsicle ink, and then I just used the edge of the ink pad of the key lime fizz so that the stem was a different color. And then there's a little leaf and a little like vine swirl, so I stamped those as well. And then there's, of course, all the different little face options. So I chose just the little smiling pumpkin face and stamped that with the VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink. And then I used the same sentiment that I used on the first card and stamped that as well in that grape slush ink, just to tie it all together. So then once that was stamped onto the inside of the card, I'm going to adhere that black cardstock panel in the same ways I did the first card. I just applied Simon's Big Mama foam tape, popped that onto my card base, and then for the ghost to adhere it, because the little eyes and mouth stamps were larger, I just hid the little 3D foam squares behind that and then popped it into place, so it's also kind of like floating above. And then I added a few more of those iridescent bubbles just to tie it all together. And that's going to finish off card number 2. So as always, I will have a link below my video to my blog post. I'll have links to all the supplies used in this new release, etc. So you can check that out below as well as on my blog if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and for thumbs upping and commenting, for subscribing. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!